The lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the ancient, dust-covered walls. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant hum of alien technology. Deep within the ruins of a long-forgotten human city, a team of alien scientists stood, laughing. The city's ruins, once a thriving metropolis filled with human life, now lay abandoned. To these alien beings, the remnants of humanity's past were nothing more than a curious spectacle, a playground for their intellectual superiority. The aliens had come from a distant world, one that had never known the chaos of war or the fragility of life as humans did. Their civilization had mastered the stars, bending the laws of science to their will. For centuries, they had watched Earth from afar, fascinated by the violent, passionate, and unpredictable species that called it home. But now, standing amidst the remnants of humanity's most significant achievements, they couldn't help but feel a sense of smug amusement. One of the aliens, a tall figure with silver skin and piercing green eyes, scoffed as he examined a shattered human building. "How primitive," he muttered, his voice cold and dismissive. These creatures barely understood the basics of construction. "Look at this, it's nothing but rubble." His colleague, a shorter alien with translucent blue skin, nodded in agreement. Indeed. Their technology was crude, inefficient. They never had the discipline to evolve beyond their own limitations. She gestured toward the wreckage of a once grand monument. This was their crowning achievement? A failed species, a fleeting moment in the galaxy's timeline. The others, a small group of scientists from various alien factions, murmured their approval. They had studied the humans from afar for centuries, reading about their wars, their triumphs, and their eventual downfall. To them, humanity was little more than an outdated curiosity, a footnote in the history of the universe. They had no interest in understanding the emotional complexity of the human experience. It was clear to them, humans were a species doomed to fade into oblivion, their ruins nothing more than a reminder of their short-lived existence. But something in the air had changed. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the atmosphere. The ancient technology embedded in the ruins, long dormant, began to hum faintly, as if reacting to their presence. The lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows across the decaying buildings. The tall alien, still inspecting the ruins, paused. His expression flickered for a moment, the slightest hint of discomfort passing across his face. He glanced at the others, but they seemed oblivious to the strange sensation. "Did you feel that?" he asked, his voice a bit more guarded now. The blue-skinned alien turned toward him, her eyes narrowing. "Feel what?" "There's nothing here but dust and decay." "You're imagining things." But the hum grew louder, more pronounced. The lights flickered once more, this time more erratically, as though some unseen force was stirring beneath the surface. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees in an instant. The group of scientists exchanged nervous glances. "This isn't normal," the tall alien murmured, his earlier confidence now replaced with a hint of uncertainty. At that moment, the faintest flicker of movement caught his eye. A figure, or what seemed like a figure, passed quickly across one of the darkened hallways of the ruin. He spun around, heart racing, but saw nothing. "What was that?" he demanded, his voice now filled with tension. One of the other scientists, a broad-shouldered alien with jagged red markings across his face, stepped forward. "It's nothing. The building is collapsing. There are bound to be tremors and structural failures." But even as he spoke, a sense of unease began to spread among the group. The lights flickered again, this time in rapid succession, and the hum grew into a low, pulsating thrum. Suddenly, a blast of cold air swept through the room. Papers, tools, and equipment flew off the ancient tables, scattering across the dusty floor. The walls seemed to pulse, their surfaces rippling as if alive. The blue-skinned scientist stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. "What is happening?" she whispered. The tall alien could hardly breathe, his instincts screaming at him that they were no longer in control. This isn't a natural phenomenon," he stammered. "We're not alone here." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently, and the lights flickered one last time, this time staying off completely, plunging the group into complete darkness. In that moment of total blackness, a voice, human, raspy, and barely a whisper, echoed through the ruins. "You think you know everything, but you know nothing." The words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the very species they had come to mock. And then, silence. The scientists stood frozen, their hearts pounding in their chests, as they realized they had underestimated the power of humanity's past. Something was awakening in the ruins, something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. What had they unleashed? And who, or what, was watching them from the shadows? They had come to ridicule, to study, but now, they were the ones who were being studied. The lights flickered back on, and the scientists' eyes widened in horror as they saw a figure standing just beyond the doorway. It was human, but not quite. The shape was contorted, a grotesque reflection of what once was. And in that instant, they realized, the ruins were not abandoned. They were waiting. The room was deathly silent. The flickering lights cast faint, trembling shadows along the crumbling walls, barely illuminating the figure standing just beyond the doorway. It wasn't fully formed, more like a distortion, a shape that wavered and shifted, its outline unnatural, as though it were caught between reality and something else entirely. The tall alien's breath hitched as his mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. His species was one of logic, of science. He had dedicated his life to studying the universe, dismantling mysteries, breaking them apart until only cold, hard facts remained. But this was beyond logic. The blue-skinned scientist, her nerves already fraying, took an instinctive step back. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The broad-shouldered alien with jagged red markings clenched his jaw. He was the only one among them who still held on to his arrogance. "It's a malfunction," he muttered, trying to sound certain. "Some sort of ancient human technology, nothing more." His voice, however, betrayed his growing unease. The flickering figure remained unmoving, its presence pressing against them like an unseen weight. The air had become thick, heavy with something unexplainable. The hum of the ruins, which had started as a faint vibration, was now an almost living pulse, like a heartbeat buried within the walls. Then the lights cut out completely. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, no one moved. The silence stretched, unnatural and suffocating. Then, a slow, deliberate sound broke through, the unmistakable creak of something shifting in the blackness. Footsteps. Coming closer. The blue-skinned scientist fumbled for the small energy light strapped to her suit, but her hands trembled too much to activate it. She could hear her own breath, quick and uneven, hear the others shifting in the dark. The tall alien reached for his own device, pressing it to life, and a narrow beam of pale green light cut through the blackness. Nothing. The doorway where the figure had stood was now empty. The corridor beyond stretched into the ruins, a maze of crumbling human architecture. The red-marked alien exhaled sharply. "It's gone." Was it ever really there? Another scientist muttered, but no one answered. The tall alien forced himself to breathe evenly. He knew what they had seen. They all had. Denying it wouldn't change the reality of the moment. But if they gave in to fear, if they let their minds run wild, they would lose control of the situation completely. He steadied himself, reminding himself of who he was, a scientist, a seeker of knowledge, not a fool who believed in ghost stories. "We should leave," the blue-skinned scientist said quietly. For once, no one argued. They moved cautiously through the ruins, their energy lights barely piercing the shadows. The corridors twisted and stretched, the remnants of human civilization pressing in around them. Broken signs hung askew, the words still legible despite the decay. A shattered display case held rusted artifacts. Scattered among the debris were things humans had left behind, fragments of their existence, frozen in time. But there was something else, too. The ruins had changed. The layout was wrong. The tall alien frowned, stopping in his tracks. He turned slowly, scanning the passage behind them. His mind raced. He had memorized the structure of this place before they had even set foot inside. He had studied the blueprints. And yet, the path they had taken should have led them back toward the entrance. It didn't. The corridors were twisting in ways they shouldn't, stretching longer than they had before. A staircase that should have led to a collapsed section now spiraled downward into pure darkness. Walls where there had been none. Openings that had disappeared. The ruins were shifting. "We're not alone," the blue-skinned scientist whispered. "We need to keep moving," the red-marked alien snapped, though his voice was tighter now, lacking its usual confidence. Then, without warning, a sound echoed through the ruins. A voice. Faint. Indistinct. But human. The scientists froze, their lights sweeping across the empty hall. The voice was close, but they couldn't see its source. It came again, clearer this time. A whisper. "You shouldn't be here." The words sent a chill through them. The tall alien forced his throat to work. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice carefully controlled. No answer. The blue-skinned scientist turned sharply, her eyes scanning the ruins with rising panic. "That wasn't a recording," she said under her breath. "That was a response." The hum of the ruins grew louder, and the temperature dropped again. Then, the lights flickered back on, dim and unstable. And that's when they saw them. Figures. Lurking in the periphery, just beyond the reach of their lights. Human, but not. They were distorted, stretched, flickering like static on a broken screen. Their faces were blurred, their eyes hollow. Some stood motionless, while others seemed to shift in and out of reality, as if they were caught between existence and nothingness. The scientists stood frozen, unable to look away. And then, one of the figures moved. It stepped forward. Not walking, gliding. The tall alien's instincts screamed at him to run. His mind was fighting to rationalize what he was seeing, but there was no logic, no scientific explanation that fit. The figure lifted its head, and for the first time, the tall alien saw its face clearly. A human. But impossibly old. Its skin was weathered, almost translucent, its eyes sunken but burning with something ancient, something that had seen far beyond what any living being should have. "You don't belong here," the figure said. Its voice was layered, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. The blue-skinned scientist's breath came in short gasps. What are you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised one withered hand and pointed, past them, deeper into the ruins. The scientists hesitated, then turned slowly. Down the corridor, beyond the shifting walls, something was waiting. A doorway. But it was no ordinary doorway. It was open. And there was light spilling from it. A light that was impossibly bright, impossibly warm, cutting through the decay of the ruins like a beacon. The air around them grew charged, thick with static. The pulse of the ruins, of whatever force had been stirring within them, grew stronger. The doorway was waiting. And the scientists knew, deep in their bones, that stepping through it would mean facing something far beyond their understanding. But they also knew, they had no other choice. The doorway pulsed with an eerie glow, its light too steady, too perfect, as if it had been untouched by time. The scientists hesitated, their instincts screaming at them to turn back. But there was nowhere else to go. The ruins behind them had twisted into something unnatural, and the flickering figures, those strange, human-like distortions, still lingered in the shadows, watching. The tall alien took a cautious step forward, his breath shallow. "We need to understand what's happening," he muttered, though the words felt hollow. He was trying to convince himself as much as the others. The blue-skinned scientist shook her head. "This isn't science anymore," she whispered. "This is something else." The red-marked alien let out a slow breath, clenching his fists. "We either go through that door, or we stay here and find out what those things want from us." He flicked his gaze toward the figures in the darkness. "I'm not waiting to be their next experiment." The decision was made. One by one, they stepped through. The light swallowed them whole. For a brief moment, there was nothing. No sound, no sensation, just an overwhelming brightness that pressed against their minds. Then, suddenly, the world snapped back into focus. They stood in a vast chamber, unlike anything they had seen in the ruins outside. The walls were smooth, gleaming, untouched by time or decay. Strange symbols lined the surfaces, shifting as though alive. The air was thick with energy, humming in a way that resonated deep in their bones. And at the center of the room stood a machine. It was massive, towering over them like a silent sentinel. Its surface gleamed with an unnatural luster, smooth yet layered with intricate engravings. At first glance, it seemed inactive, no flashing lights, no signs of movement, but the longer they stared, the more they felt it watching them. "This technology," the blue-skinned scientist whispered. She stepped forward, her hands shaking as she reached out. "This isn't primitive. This is advanced. More advanced than anything we've ever seen." The tall alien swallowed hard. "That's impossible. Humanity never reached this level before their fall." "Then someone else built it," the red-marked alien said. His voice was low, uncertain. "Or, they weren't as primitive as we thought." A shiver passed through the group. It was a possibility none of them wanted to consider. They had come here believing humans were a failed species, that their ruins were nothing more than relics of a lesser civilization. But this was something else. Then the hum in the air deepened. The machine was waking up. A low vibration ran through the floor beneath them. Symbols along the walls flickered, shifting into patterns they couldn't decipher. The light in the room dimmed, as though being absorbed into the machine itself. Then, the voices returned. Soft at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. But they grew louder, overlapping, twisting around one another. "You have come too far." The scientists spun, searching for the source, but there was no single speaker. The voices were all around them, pressing in, impossible to pinpoint. "You are not welcome here." The tall alien's pulse raced. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What is this place?" The voices didn't answer directly. Instead, the walls shimmered, and suddenly, the chamber was no longer empty. They were surrounded. Humans. Or at least, what looked like them. Men and women of different ages, dressed in strange, antiquated clothing, their faces frozen in unreadable expressions. Some looked almost normal, others, less so. Their features blurred at the edges, their bodies flickering in and out of focus. The scientists backed away instinctively. The blue-skinned scientist swallowed hard. "These aren't real. They're..." One of the figures moved. A woman, her face half lost in distortion, stepped forward. Her eyes locked onto the tall alien, and for a moment, there was something there. A presence. A mind. "You took everything from us," she said. The words sent a cold spike of fear through him. "What does she mean?" the red-marked alien hissed, stepping back. The woman didn't blink. Didn't move like a living being. "You watched," she continued. "You studied. You waited." The tall alien felt his breath hitch. He didn't know what she was talking about, but the way she spoke, the certainty in her tone, made his stomach twist. "We never harmed humans," he said carefully. "We only observed. Your civilization fell long before. You let it happen," another voice interrupted. A man this time. Older. His face marked with something between sorrow and fury. His image crackled, shifting as though he were barely holding on to existence. The scientists exchanged panicked glances. The blue-skinned scientist shook her head. "They're not real. They can't be." But the woman stepped closer. "You never helped," she said. "You watched from the stars while we burned." The machine pulsed again. The energy in the room grew heavier, pressing against them like a weight. The voices grew layered, overlapping, echoing in strange, broken tones. "You let us die. You let us suffer. You let us become this." The red-marked alien's breathing turned shallow. "We didn't do anything," he whispered. "We weren't even here." "Exactly." The machine surged with power, and the figures flickered violently, their images breaking apart, reforming. The tall alien's mind raced. Something was wrong. This wasn't just an old ruin. This wasn't just a remnant of human civilization. This was a warning. Or worse, retribution. The voices became a chorus now, their anger swelling into something tangible. The lights flickered, the walls trembled, and the machine at the center of the room let out a deep, reverberating pulse. A doorway, another one, opened at the far end of the chamber. Beyond it, the ruins stretched again, but they were no longer static. They were shifting, warping. The city outside was alive, reacting to them, folding and unfolding like a puzzle rearranging itself. They weren't just exploring anymore. They were being tested. The blue-skinned scientist's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." But as they turned toward the new doorway, the figures moved too. They weren't blocking their path. They were following. And something told the scientists that if they left now, they wouldn't be leaving alone. The ruins were no longer ruins. The walls twisted, the corridors stretched, and the city itself pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as if it were waking from a long slumber. The scientists moved quickly, their steps uneven, their breaths sharp. The flickering figures, distorted echoes of humans, followed silently, their forms phasing in and out of focus, their eyes locked onto the intruders. The tall alien's mind raced. This wasn't what they had expected. They had come here believing they would find the remnants of a lost species, the decayed bones of a civilization long gone. Instead, the ruins had turned against them. The past was not resting peacefully. It was alive. And it was watching. The red-marked alien stole a glance over his shoulder. "They're not attacking," he muttered, though there was no comfort in his words. "They don't have to," the blue-skinned scientist whispered back. "They want us to see something. They're leading us somewhere." Ahead, the open doorway pulsed faintly, a beckoning light in the shifting darkness. But stepping through felt like stepping into a trap. The tall alien hesitated at the threshold, his breath uneven. The others waited, eyes darting between him and the path ahead. They had no choice. He stepped through. The air inside was heavy, charged with a strange energy that made his skin prickle. The others followed, moving as one, their fear thick in the silence between them. Then the door behind them slammed shut. The chamber was massive, stretching beyond the limits of their energy lights. The walls were smooth, untouched by decay, lined with the same shifting symbols from before. But this time, they weren't just symbols. They were stories. Moving, flowing like liquid metal, they depicted scenes that sent ice through the tall alien's veins. Cities burning. Skies filled with falling debris. Humans running, their faces twisted in terror. And above them all, watching, unmoving, figures that looked eerily familiar. The scientists. Or rather, their kind. The blue-skinned scientist stumbled back, her voice barely a whisper. "No, this isn't real." The symbols shifted again, and suddenly, the scenes weren't of destruction. They were of silence. Cities abandoned. Buildings empty. The last traces of humanity fading into nothing. And once again, the silent observers in the sky. "You let us die." The voice didn't come from the walls this time. It came from the darkness ahead. Something moved. A shape, tall, impossible to fully focus on. It was humanoid but wrong, its presence pressing against the edges of reality. The red-marked alien tensed. "Who are you?" he demanded, though his voice wavered. The shape did not answer immediately. It stepped closer, the flickering light casting jagged shadows across its form. Its face was indistinct, shifting like the static-filled figures that had followed them. But its voice was painfully clear. "The last of us." The words echoed through the chamber, sinking into the very walls. The scientists stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what they were hearing. "The last of humanity?" the blue-skinned scientist asked, though she already knew the answer. The figure didn't move. "We waited. For years, we waited. We sent signals. We searched the skies. A pause, heavy with something unspoken. You were there. The tall alien's throat went dry. He had studied human history. He had read the reports. They had been a species on the brink, their world crumbling beneath their feet. And yes, the stars had been full of silent watchers, alien civilizations advanced enough to help. But no one had. We didn't interfere, the red-marked alien said stiffly. We couldn't. The figure tilted its head, its form flickering. Couldn't, or wouldn't. The walls around them pulsed again, shifting once more. The symbols faded, replaced by something new. Something worse. Experiments. The images showed humans, captured, examined, studied. Not by their own kind. By outsiders. By them. The tall alien felt his stomach twist. That's not. But the figure cut him off. You came after we were gone, it said, its voice an eerie calm. You picked apart what remained. You called us a mystery. A failure. A lesson. The air grew heavier. The energy in the room pulsed in time with the flickering figures, with the machine that still loomed in the background. You are not the first to come here, the figure continued. Others like you have stepped onto our ruins. They came with curiosity. A pause. They did not leave. The walls trembled. The symbols flared, casting wild shadows across the room. The scientists staggered as the floor beneath them vibrated, as if something was awakening deep below. The red-marked alien clenched his fists. Then why let us see all of this? If you want us gone, why not just? The figure's form flickered violently. Because you must understand. The doorway ahead pulsed brighter. The air grew thick with static. The ruins were shifting again, twisting into something unstable. The scientists felt it now, this wasn't just a warning. This was a choice. And the moment to make it was running out. The walls trembled as if the entire structure was alive, reacting to their presence. The air was thick with something unseen, pressing against their bodies, making their every breath feel heavier. The symbols on the walls pulsed violently now, shifting faster, almost desperate. The scientists had seen enough to understand. This was more than just a warning, it was a message. A reckoning. The figure in the darkness flickered, its form distorting as if barely holding itself together. You must understand, it repeated, voice layered, overlapping, as though more than one presence was speaking through it. The scientists exchanged panicked glances, their instincts screaming at them to move, to run, but there was nowhere to go. Then, the walls changed again. This time, the images weren't just memories of the past. They were of now. The ruins. The city outside. The towering remains of human structures, but no longer abandoned. They were rebuilding themselves. The tall alien's heart pounded. What is this? The blue-skinned scientist shook her head, her mind racing to find an explanation. The ruins outside had been nothing but shattered remains when they arrived. But now, on the shifting walls, the buildings stood tall again. The streets were filled with movement, ghostly figures walking, living, existing. The city was coming back to life. But not as it once was. The red-marked alien took a step forward, staring at the visions in horror. This isn't just a recording of the past. He turned to the flickering figure, voice tense. This is happening right now, isn't it? The figure didn't answer. It simply watched as the scene on the walls continued to change. Then the final image appeared. The scientists. The three of them, standing exactly where they were, staring in shock. But in the vision, they weren't alone. Behind them, figures, dozens of them, stood just out of focus. Watching. Waiting. Their faces were unreadable, their forms flickering between human and something else entirely. And then, one by one, the figures turned their heads, toward the real scientists. The room plunged into darkness. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, shaking the ground beneath them. The blue-skinned scientist gasped as a cold rush of energy surged through the room, making the hair on her arms stand on end. Something was changing. The red-marked alien's breathing turned ragged. "We need to go. Now." They turned toward the doorway, the only possible escape, but it wasn't just a doorway anymore. It was shifting, stretching, expanding into something unnatural. The light beyond it flickered, revealing glimpses of something wrong. The ruins were no longer the ruins they had entered. The city outside was alive, but it wasn't just reconstructing itself. It was pulling them in. The scientists staggered back, their minds scrambling to comprehend what was happening. The walls pulsed, the floor beneath them vibrated, and the figures, those flickering, fractured remnants of humanity, were stepping forward now, closing in. The tall alien's throat tightened. "They don't want us to leave." The blue-skinned scientist clenched her fists, her voice barely above a whisper. "No. They want us to stay." The red-marked alien turned sharply, scanning the room for any possible way out. "We can't let that happen," he snapped. "We came here to study history, not to become part of it." The flickering figure at the center of the room suddenly stilled, its distorted form solidifying for the briefest moment. And then it spoke again. "There is no history." The air turned ice-cold. The scientists froze as the words settled over them. The blue-skinned scientist shook her head. What do you mean?" The figure's face flickered again, shifting between different human expressions: rage, sorrow, emptiness. "You misunderstand. This is not the past." The ground beneath them lurched violently. The city outside wasn't being rebuilt. It wasn't restoring itself from ruin. It was resetting. And they were caught inside it. The tall alien's pulse pounded in his ears. "We were never meant to leave." The doorway twisted again, stretching impossibly wide. The darkness within it pulsed, and beyond, the city was no longer the empty shell they had first encountered. It was whole. It was thriving. And it was waiting for them to step forward. The flickering figure took a final step toward them, its distorted face locking onto theirs. And in that moment, the scientists understood. They weren't the first to come here. They wouldn't be the last. And soon, they would no longer be visitors. They would be part of the city. Forever. The ground trembled violently beneath their feet, and a deafening hum filled the air. The scientists staggered, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. The walls around them pulsed faster, the symbols shifting so erratically they became unreadable. The city was no longer just resetting, it was pulling them in, reshaping reality around them. The doorway, their only exit, twisted and warped as if it was alive, no longer leading to the ruins they had first stepped into. The flickering figures, distorted echoes of humanity, moved closer, their hollow eyes locked onto the intruders. The air was thick with static, an energy so overwhelming it felt like it was sinking into their very bones. The blue-skinned scientist clutched her head. "We need to move. We can't stay here." The red-marked alien's fists clenched. "There's nowhere to go." The tall alien's mind raced, searching for a solution. There had to be something, some way out of this nightmare. And then, he saw it. At the far end of the chamber, beyond the flickering figures, there was a single console. It was unlike anything else in the ruins, its surface smooth and untouched by time. The symbols on it pulsed in slow, deliberate waves, in contrast to the chaos around them. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a city. It was something more. The ruins weren't ruins at all, they were part of a system, a machine still running beneath the surface, controlling everything. "This place, it's still operational," he muttered. The blue-skinned scientist turned sharply toward him. "What?" He didn't answer. He was already moving. Dodging between the flickering figures, he rushed toward the console, ignoring the way the air around him seemed to thicken, as if something unseen was trying to hold him back. The hum grew louder, pressing into his skull, but he forced himself forward, reaching out. His fingers brushed against the surface. The city screamed. A surge of energy shot through him, sending pain lancing through his body. The console came to life beneath his touch, symbols flashing, shifting, rewriting themselves. The walls trembled as the figures around him flickered erratically, their forms distorting, twisting in on themselves. The blue-skinned scientist and the red-marked alien stumbled backward as the chamber itself began to dissolve. The air vibrated with a soundless roar, and the figures turned, their empty gazes fixed on the tall alien as if they knew. And then, the city collapsed. A blinding light consumed everything. The next thing he knew, he was lying on his back, gasping for breath. The hum was gone. The ruins were gone. No. Not gone. They were back to the way they had been when they first arrived, silent, lifeless, crumbling under the weight of time. The air was still. The flickering figures were nowhere to be seen. The city was nothing more than ruins once again. The red-marked alien groaned, pushing himself up. What happened? The blue-skinned scientist sat up, her eyes wide with shock. I think he shut it down. The tall alien struggled to his feet, his body still trembling. He turned slowly, looking at the crumbling remains around them. It was as if none of it had ever happened. No pulsing walls, no shifting doorways. Just abandoned ruins, as they had always believed them to be. But something still felt wrong. The silence was too perfect. The air too still. And then, he noticed it. The console. It was still there. Still untouched by time. And on its surface, a single symbol remained, glowing faintly. A message. He hesitated before stepping closer, his breath catching in his throat. The symbol shifted, rearranging itself into something he could understand. 3 words. We are waiting. His blood turned to ice. The others saw it too. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of those words settled over them like a crushing force. The city had gone quiet, but it hadn't died. It was still here. Still watching. Still waiting. And they had just proven to it that life beyond humanity still existed. The 3 scientists stood frozen in place, staring at the glowing message on the console. The silence around them felt heavier than before, as if the city itself was holding its breath. No hum, no flickering figures, no shifting walls, just stillness. But they all felt it. The presence. It was still here, watching from the unseen corners of the ruins, waiting for something. The red-marked alien exhaled shakily. We need to leave. His voice was firm, but underneath it was an edge of something he rarely let show, fear. The blue-skinned scientist took a step back, her gaze flicking around the chamber as if expecting the walls to start moving again. It let us go, she murmured. But why? The tall alien didn't answer. His mind was racing, piecing together everything they had seen. The city had never been abandoned. It had never been dead. It was part of something greater, something ancient, patient, and aware. And when he had touched that console, he hadn't just shut something down. He had made contact. And now, it knew about them. A deep unease settled in his chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. He turned sharply. Let's move. Now. They didn't hesitate. Moving quickly, they retraced their steps through the ruins, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Everything was as it had been when they arrived, broken pillars, crumbling walls, dust-covered floors. But the atmosphere was different now. It was as if the city had gone back to sleep, slipping into the ruins of time once more. Yet, the scientists couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they stepped out into the open, the towering remains of the city loomed around them, their jagged edges silhouetted against the sky. The storm that had once hovered over the ruins had cleared, revealing a deep, starless void stretching endlessly above. It was eerily quiet. No wind, no shifting rubble, nothing. The red-marked alien glanced back at the ruins one last time. We were wrong about this place, he muttered. The blue-skinned scientist nodded slowly. This wasn't just a human city. It was something more. And it still is. The tall alien remained silent. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the vast expanse of the abandoned landscape stretched out before them. Everything felt too still. Too perfect. As if the moment they turned their backs, the city would start shifting again, resetting itself, waiting for its next visitors. Their ship was still where they had left it, untouched. The sight of it was a relief, a reminder that they could still leave. They boarded quickly, running through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. None of them spoke about what they had seen. None of them dared to voice the lingering fear in their minds. As the engines roared to life, the tall alien stole one last glance at the ruins through the viewport. They sat there, quiet, lifeless. But he knew better now. The city wasn't ruined. It wasn't dead. It was waiting. And it always had been. The ship lifted off, breaking free of the surface and soaring toward the atmosphere. The ruins shrank beneath them, fading into the distance. But just as they breached the planet's outer layer, a faint pulse ran through the ship's systems. A subtle, almost imperceptible flicker of light across the control panels. The blue-skinned scientist noticed it first. "Did you see that?" she asked, frowning. The red-marked alien hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls. "I thought it was just..." The ship's scanners lit up for a split second, detecting something massive, deep beneath the ruins. But before they could analyze it, the signal vanished. Gone. The three of them exchanged uneasy glances, but no one said a word. There was nothing left to do. The city had let them go. But it had also sent a message. The tall alien turned his gaze to the stars ahead. He didn't know when or how, but one thing was certain. The humans were gone. But their legacy wasn't. And one day, something, or someone, would return to finish what had begun.